Hello, my name is Neha and you're watching this video on the Pratyancha channel. Today I bring to you the third part of our discussion on the poem Burnt Norton. If you have not watched the first two videos, the link to these two videos can be found in the description box below. We saw in the second video that Eliot was speaking about souls that have been on a journey of decay. He will continue to explain his thoughts further, and we, with him, shall take our discussion further as well. So come, let's discuss Burnt Norton by T.S. Eliot. He goes on to say and explain the pessimism, internal darkness, deprivation and destitution of all property, desiccation of the world of sense, evacuation of the world of fancy, inoperancy in the world of spirit. He says that such a man or such a soul which is degraded to that extent will feel only internal darkness. There is deprivation. There's nothing around that you can actually call your own. Destitution. These are all words used for poverty. Desiccation. Total drying up of the world of sense. You have no clue how to make sense of the world around you. Evacuation, inoperancy, all the negative words he used. You're worthy of nothing, you're doing nothing. It's a feckless, totally forgettable existence that you've come to. And then he adds the last four lines. This is the one way and the other is the same, not in movement but abstention from movement, while the world moves in appetency on its metalled ways of time past and future. He says to decay is one way, but the other way is not to move. Because you cannot move. The present will impose a limit on you and eventually you will be ravaged by the journey of time. This is his sheer pessimism about human life. And he says that while decaying is one way, the other way is not movement, but it's abstention from movement. You don't decay, but you don't move at all, while the world moves on its metalled ways. Metalled ways, ways that have been set, cast in metal. The world moves as it has to. It's its tendency, appetency is tendency to move on these ways of time past and future. So only two options he gives you. Either you decay or you just stand and then the world moves. There is no way to grow, to liberate or to achieve a higher ideal. That he's not promising us here. Continuing his pessimistic streak, Eliot now takes it to the absolute nadir of darkness. He says, time and bell have buried the day. The black cloud carries the sun away. With the sunflower, will the sunflower turn to us? Will the clematis stray down, bend to us, tendril and spray, clutch and cling? Chill fingers of you be curled down on us. After the kingfisher's wing has answered light to light and is silent, the light is still at the still point of the turning world. We understood from the last bit which we just discussed before these lines was, this is part 4, so the end of part 3 was that there are only two ways. Either you can decay, you can completely give up and you can end up in a hopeless state from there is no redemption, or you can be in the moment and you can see how the world is going on its ways, on its metalled ways, and not do anything, not participate in that movement, but just be there. And here he says that when you choose either of these two paths, there will come a present which would be the last. There would come a present which would spell total doom for you and your existence. And then to describe this present, he says that time and bell would have buried the day. So bell, it's of a bell tower or a clock tower, and time, of course, is the continual protagonist of the piece. So he says your time would have come to an end. The clocks and the bell tower would have shown that it is the end. The black clouds would have carried away the sun. So the sun has set as well, and cloud once again a metaphor for darkness, for gloom. And then he says that in the darkness will the sunflower turn to us. And after that he speaks of two such plants which are not known to have positive impact on human body or human lives. So he speaks of the clematis. This flower, some of the variants are being tested for some medicinal purposes, but largely this flower has compounds which can cause several kinds of irritation, some internal bleeding. So basically it is not something which is conducive for human consumption. And also yew is a poisonous plant, and Eliot names these two plants here, and these then become metaphors of all that in the world which is in any case trying to engulf us, to defeat us, to bring us to our doom. Is this now going to happen in one of these presents when I choose either of the paths, whether of decaying or whether of just staying in the moment and going from one present to the other in the wind, behaving as the wind behaves? So, and he then says, explains that yes, the kingfisher bird was flying when the sun was out, but now it was answering light to light, but now is silent. So the light is all gone. And this is the still point of the turning world. So the day has set and our moment in the darkness has begun. So what will happen now? Will we be engulfed by all that is poisonous and destructive in nature, and will it come and claim us? Or what is going to happen now? Because now that the time and bell have buried the day. So he's now coming to the Nadar, like I said, the lowest point of his pessimism in the poem, where he feels that we would have lived a meaningless life and then we would just go away and will be eaten up by the forces in the nature. The last bit is an interesting addition to this poem, because it not just speaks about Eliot's concept of time, but it also speaks about Eliot's concept of language. And for a poet, it's very, very important what understanding he has of language. It is the words of a language that he uses or she uses to express the thoughts that arise. So Eliot says that I'm going to now talk about these words and how they come to present themselves in the form of my poetry. This part of the poem is the last part, the fifth part, and it's self-reflective in nature. Having established his concept of time, the fact that there is no liberation from this past, present, future sort of a thing, and the fact that even if there is a liberation in a present, it's too fleeting, and having established all that pessimism, now he reflects on his own life as a poet, and he does that with the words move. So he starts to talk about the words that a poet uses. He says, words move, music moves only in time, but that which is only living can only die. Words, after speech, reach into the silence. Only by the form and the pattern can words or music reach. The stillness, as a Chinese jar, still moves perpetually in its stillness. He says that words, they move, music moves, but only in time. If I were to say a sentence, you listen to it in a duration of time. It is not like we can do it instantly. So we have to have this duration of time, this movement of time from the past to the present to the future, to be able to perceive words, to be able to perceive music. And he says that when words have spoken, they reach into silence. And yet it is only through this form and patterning of words that he could write poetry, that I can speak to you, that we can read, that we can talk, that we can express ourselves. And he says that words or music can still, like a Chinese jar stills, and it moves perpetually in its stillness. When you create a thing of beauty, when you've spoken the right words, either you've created poetry or said the right words in the right situation, very pertinent, germane words in a particular situation, when you do that, then whatever word construction you have used, it has the power to move. And he uses the metaphor of the Chinese jar to explain something of great beauty which can move in its stillness. So the jar is made, constructed, it's an object, it's right there, it's still, it's not moving, but its beauty, its construction, its art can move you. Similarly, a well-worded word construction can move you in its stillness. Stillness, its form and pattern have been decided. They have been, the words have been chosen. Sometimes we feel that we wanted to say something, but then we could not really convey it properly because the words that we chose were not right. Sometimes we feel we chose the right words, but our stresses were not perfect. Sometimes we feel the stresses were perfect, the words were perfect, but perhaps I should have said this particular thing before that thing, and we feel the sequence has not been in place. So that is the form and pattern of the words. They can only move when they have been stilled into a form and a pattern, like an object, a work of art. So he says words and music have this power. And then he goes on to explain it further, and he takes a musical instrument to explain this. Not the stillness of the violin while the note lasts, not only that, but the coexistence, or say that the end precedes the beginning. And at the end and the beginning were always there, before the beginning and after the end. And he says that once you come across a piece of music that moves you, a proper word construction that moves you, or maybe a Chinese jar, an object, a work of art, it's very difficult to say what came before what came after what. It seems like everything was done at one go. There is a simultaneity to a work of art, to a piece of poetry. For example, we just don't look at the first line of Eliot's poetry and then forget it, and then look at the second line and then forget it. Perhaps in the last line we'll understand the meaning of the first line, or perhaps in the 16th line we'll revisit the 14th and understand it better, and perhaps it is the second line which will throw light upon the 20th line. So you really do not know that where is the beginning and where is the end. And that, he says, is the power of a present within which a construction is stilled. The form and the pattern, they are so tightly woven, they give the identity to that particular thing, be it a piece of poetry, be it a work of art, that it comes to a stillness by way of its identity, and in that has the power to move you. And within this stillness there is no past, no future, there is nothing that precedes, nothing that comes after, but everything seems to work in a simultaneity. So that is the coexistence of the musical note that he talks about. And he says that it's not just while the note lasts that he's talking about the stillness, but he's saying that the end precedes the beginning. I feel when the music reaches its end, I realize that now I understand the beginning, or now the beginning has been justified, explained, or made more potent, and therefore the end and the beginning belong to each other. And all is always now. Words strain, crack, and sometimes break under the burden, under the tension, slip, slide, perish, decay with imprecision, will not stay in place, will not stay still. Shrieking voices, scolding, mocking, or merely chattering always assail them. The word in the desert is most attacked by voices of temptation. The crying shadow in the funeral dance, the loud lament of the disconsolate chimera. In this particular stanza, Eliot is wanting to say that yes, it is the stillness of the word construction that actually can move you, but it's not easy to construct it, because we try and find the particular words, we try and say them very well so that we are able to convey what is inside my heart. And he says we usually don't succeed at doing that very well, because words sometimes strain, they crack, they sometimes break, we say something else, the others understand something else. I keep saying in my sessions that I love you are the most misunderstood words on the face of this planet, and they're the simplest words to understand. So what we mean, what we express, and what the other interprets. So therefore the words do not play their role very well. And it is here that he comes across with his concept of language. He says that I do express, I do write, but it's almost like my idea is this disconsolate chimera which has not been realized, which is an illusion. So my idea remains an illusion, and it is almost it's a funeral dance, my poetry, because the idea is dead now. I've expressed it, yet I've not expressed it as well as I would have wanted to, and the other is not taking the same meanings that I would want them to. Therefore my idea in my poetry, in my writing, is actually the illusion or the chimera, shrieking and crying as if this poetry is the funeral dance, that it has remained unexpressed. This ties to the beginning of the poem when he was wanting to say that I want to visit things that I should have done but I have not done. So here he's saying that yes, word constructions are important, art is important. In the present you create this art, you try and say things in a way that they can move other people, but it's not easy. It's not easy to be doing this, and language tries to somehow deceive you, and the words then the shrieking voices, they assail the words. And look at the terminology that he uses. That word in the desert is most attacked by voices of temptation, the crying shadow in the funeral dance. So I have said my poetry, but I haven't expressed it. So my temptation to have expressed that idea is now this chimera who's disconsolate. You cannot console it. You cannot tell it that it's okay if you're not fully expressed. Don't worry. No, it always remains as this lost soul in the desert which has not been well expressed. He goes on to say, the detail of the pattern is movement, as in the figure of 10 stairs. Desire itself is movement, not in itself desirable. Love is itself unmoving, only the cause and end of movement, timeless and undesiring, except in the aspect of time, caught in the form of limitation between unbeing and being. In this stanza, he describes the difference between desire and love. He says love doesn't desire. Desire is movement. Desire is that movement from the past to the present to the future when you desire. But love, it's just still. It's in the present and it's unmoving. And that is what we really aspire to. But love also is caught in the tangle of time between unbeing and being. So though we experience love, it is not the truest of love. Like he said earlier in the stanza, that though we experience light, it is not pure light. It is assailed by somewhat the darkness of blackness, and therefore we do experience love, but it's mingled with desire, it's mingled with the movement of time, and therefore human life really doesn't have any chance at liberation. He continues with his pessimistic theme. And he concludes by saying, sudden, in a shaft of sunlight, even while the dust moves, there rises the hidden laughter of children in the foliage. Quick now, here now, always, ridiculous, the waste sad time stretching before and after. And then he says, suddenly there is sunlight. With all this pessimism, he takes us back to the imagery that he started with, that his ideas are like the children which are yet to be born in a garden that he visits. And he says that suddenly I see this ray of sunlight coming in, and the dust perhaps on the bowl of the rose leaves, it moves, and the hidden laughter of children is heard, of children in the foliage. Quick here, quick now. Ridiculous, the waste sad time stretching before and after. It is in the moment, in the present, when you chase your dreams, when you chase your ideas, that you actually live. Everything else before, everything else after is ridiculous. It's a waste. And he feels that this hidden laughter, the desires that we live for, the aims that we live for, and the love that is unmoving and we find in a conscious present is what we should strive towards. So that's Burnt Norton by T.S. Eliot. I have tried to very well capture the thoughts I believe Eliot put in the poem. I do not necessarily agree with all of them, especially with the pessimism. I do not agree way too much. Do let me know what your thoughts are about this work, and do stay tuned. We'll keep bringing you many more videos of wonderful poetry from across the world. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being at Pratyancha.